Hey there, guys. So, my name is Mohit Zaman, and I happen to be the examiner of the English subjects for the Fastpapers Mock Championship 2026. And here I am with the 1123 component of GCE English O levels of the English language, paper 2, since that's the first upcoming paper for your upcoming calendar of the GCE English exams. And without any further ado, let's make this start. Let's get this started. And yeah, so like you all know, section 1 consists of two texts, both being on different parts of the argument. So whereas text A is our school administrator named Rahim, and text B is Nadia, a sixth grade student. So as you have already read through the text, first text, and it talks about why smartphones aren't the best thing that exists on schools. So while smartphones can be useful, they are one of the biggest distractions in schools today. Students claim they need them for learning, but in reality, most use them for social media, games, or meeting during lessons, and this reduces focus and wastes valuable class time. Moreover, when I first started teaching, smartphones were not common and students were far more attentive. Now it is increasingly difficult to maintain discipline as many students are constantly checking their devices. A complete ban would remove this problem instantly and create more focused learning environment. There are also concerns about cheating and academic dishonesty. With access to the internet at all times, students can easily look up answers during tests or assignments. Banning smartphones would ensure fairness and protect the integrity of exams. In conclusion, this person also says some students argue that phones are necessary, but schools already provide the resources needed for learning. Removing smartphones during school hours would encourage students to concentrate, interact more with their peers, and develop better study habits. For these reasons, I strongly believe smartphones should be completely banned in schools. So that's the take for Rahim of not supporting for a smartphone, and whereas Nadia, on the other hand, as we can predict, talks for smartphones being accessible in schools. So she mentions smartphones are a normal part of modern life, and banning them in schools is unrealistic and unnecessary. Instead of removing them, schools should teach students how to use them properly or responsibly. Many students use their phones to access educational resources, research information, and organize their work. In my experience, smartphones have actually improved my learning. I can quickly look up difficult concepts, use educational apps, and communicate with classmates about assignments. These tools make studying more efficient and flexible. Smartphones also help students stay connected with their families, which can be important in emergencies. Completely banning them could create unnecessary stress and make students feel less secure. Rather than banning smartphones, schools should set clear rules about when and how they can be used. This would allow students to benefit from technology while still maintaining discipline in the classroom. I believe smartphones, when used properly, are a valuable tool and should not be completely banned. So guys, those are the two texts. It's important to note that based on these two texts, you may have either the three options. You can either have a speech, you can have a letter, you can also have an email. Or more likely other case scenarios, highly likely a speech, for which instance I also too went with the speech module and gave you guys a task of writing a speech to your teacher asking to give a speech on the statement of smartphones should be completely banned in schools. So again, you know the take, you have no option to support these smartphones in per context to what the text says. You are to evaluate the argument for and against banning smartphones, and of course give your own views on whether smartphones should be banned in schools. So it's about a 250 to 350 words is what you have the boundary of writing your speech between, the threshold of word count. More importantly, let's move on to the mark scheme, where the highest bandwidth selects a wide range of relevant facts, ideas, opinions from the text, and analyzes, evaluates, and develops the chosen content in a way that clearly fulfills an element of the task. Followed by, there is content is complex, well developed, and effective. Well-organized structure that assimilates ideas from the texts, and also most importantly, wide range of well-constructed sentences accurately are used and includes complex sentences. So those are the most key points. As you go down to the bandwidth level of the mark scheme, you're basically just narrowing down the use and effectiveness of your words and vocabs and basically writing style. So on that note, what I am doing is basically among you guys, Zawad Hussain is one of the candidates who has scored the highest out of the among the participants for paper 2 English GCE. And what I will be doing is reading through his scripts and giving a nice clear live feedback of what his score and what he could have done to score a bit higher than what he has already achieved. So out of 25 he scored a whopping 20, which is actually a very good high scoring level band. And yeah, it's actually quite good and would comes with a lot of advices and suggestions that can help you with your own write-up. Straight to the straight to the speech. Good morning, everyone. My name is Awad Hussain, and I am the president of this year's Student Council. Smartphones are a big necessity in today's world and have help us progress in our day-to-day lives. But are they necessity at school? Are smartphones truly a mean to better just focus on our education, or is it just a big distraction? After weighing out both the pros and cons, I can conclude that smartphones, while useful, are one of the biggest distractions in schools today. So guys, what he has done here is a very nice strong start to the speech. He mentions his reason behind the speech, not given from the task itself, but he mentions the scenario of being a president in a student council and having the courage, I won't say courage, but having the platform to speak up about why smartphones shouldn't be used. Again, using that as a thesis statement to his introduction. That being said, his first body says, when I was still at in grade 6, a friend of mine had just gotten a smartphone for his incredible midterm grades and started bringing it to school. We all were very shocked since smartphones were uncommon, claiming that he was extremely lucky to have parents like that. However, that same phone would bring about his downfall. Ever since he got the phone, his grades dropped significantly. He would hand in homework late, copy information from Wikipedia, and even try to cheat on tests. This inattentiveness and addiction to his phone ultimately led to him dropping out, or I would say would have been a better term to use, dropping to his downfall, led to his downfall. Would have been a better term, I'd say. Phones are one of the greatest inventions in our history that exists us a lot throughout our day-to-day lives, but at school, they are one of the biggest distractions. Many students claim phones are needed to progress in their educational, yet mostly use them for social media, games, or texting in the middle of lectures. Smartphones act like drugs or narcotics, gripping onto the dopamine receptors of the mind and diverting us from studying, reducing both our focus and discipline that must be maintained in a classroom. This takes a toll on the teachers too, as they have to constantly discipline students and waste time trying to establish a proper learning environment. Moreover, with phones at the disposal of students, concerns of cheating and dishonesty arise. As students have access to phones and the internet all the time, they can easily look up answers and plagiarize writing, ruining the integrity of the school itself. So notice how here is where he went full on the content points that were mentioned from the inserts. And insert text 1. Text A is what all these points were there, and he used his own style of writing, own accuracy of grammar, and his tonality of speech and word choices that gives a more character to his writing from his own stance. Again, on the third body para, he mentions, however, some argue phones are otherwise. They claim phones as a gateway to means to access better educational resources and information, help organize their work and improve their learning. They say by using educational apps, looking up difficult concepts and problems, it makes studying more reliable, efficient, and flexible. Furthermore, they claim smartphones help students stay connected to their peers and, more importantly, families in case of emergencies. This provides the students with a sense of security and peace of mind. Again, he has points from the insert of text B this time, basically giving a counter argument to the ones who already mentioned in the previous body para. And at the conclusive take, he finds and puts a anchor to his previously stated take of introducing that smartphone should be banned. Due to these reasons, some individuals insist that rather than banning phones, alternatives or countermeasures should be implemented instead, as a clear rule on how and when phones can be used. However, do we truly believe this is the best course of action? I believe smartphones and schools can never live at the harmony with one another, and that it should be banned. So, guys, notice his tonality of word choice of how he's writing. I'm kind of having to struggle a bit to go with the same tone, but nonetheless, it's well written. I will be addressing this as well at the very end with the feedback. So, moving on, schools already provide students with sufficient resources needed for learning. So, if smartphones are banned, it would never negatively harm students. Rather, it would encourage them to concentrate, interact, and fraternize with their peers and develop better study habits. Very nicely done. And he also mentions the word count. Yes, your examiner will still do a double check of your word count, so you are on the right track and not really deriving them to a not so accurate word count. But yeah, his was quite on the mark. But yeah, it would have been better if it was between 250 to 350 words. So on my feedback element, I have awarded him 9 out of 10. It's quite hard to get a full 10 out of 10 because sometimes, despite of bringing up all the content, it's important how you organize and how you're addressing each point and you're transiting from one point to another. So that's where that 1 mark is quite difficult to bring up, despite copy pasting every point from the text and insert. But yeah, his excellent coverage of both texts, his word choices, how he mentioned the social media part, the dopamine, the addiction, the analogy, the plagiarism, the cheating. He also has his own take when it comes to using words more sophisticatedly, which gives you more marks for the second part of the bandwidth of the writing part than just the reading. And yeah, his sophistication and the confidence throughout the speech was something very, like I'd say, very unique from every other script, which gave him the extra marks and extra boost from the rest of the average speech. Because something which I would recommend and give a tip for every candidates who are about to write their speech for the upcoming exams, hopefully if it comes, because we predict it would be a speech most likely, and that's the part where your tonality comes into play, your own style, your own word choice, bringing in more character to your speech. So as far as the weaknesses which I found that came down for Zawad's write-up, and that is his grammatical slips, not using the right punctuations at the right places to drive the examiner, the reader, to read it how exactly the speech should have been delivered, is where the punctuations come into play. And yeah, grammatical errors, especially at higher band scores levels, does take you down and just slips off from the level 6 from 22 23. You want to have a very smooth and flawless writing to get those score. But yeah, 20 isn't a bad score at all, and definitely is on par for the A star if you could keep the consistency going. On that note, I think it's a good time to transit to the next section of the question paper, which we're all familiar with, and that is the section B, composition part. I guess it's just one essay with tons of options, 2 for each for descriptive and essay. And yeah, I did go with a very common topic with a title under my birthday and a nice scenic descriptive of a bustling food court. Many of you actually haven't went with a descriptive writing and went with the easier route of narrative, but I must say that again, the script I am using to demonstrate a nice simulation of how things would be nice for your exams, he did go with the narrative of the most unique one. So most people went with the 4 option of writing a story in which someone finds an interesting photo in a basement, but Zawad goes with a more unique, quit procrastinating, you should learn by now, is what he includes throughout his narrative. So let's get right to it then. And here it is. This was the narrative he writes based on question number 5, and that scores a 21 out of 25, and that's quite remarkable, I'd say, quite praiseworthy. So let's see. So he starts with the title, which writes The Leather-Bound Diary of Regrets. The clouds started rolling in, covering up the once spotless blue sky. Tears ran down my rosy cheeks as I stood still in front of the grave contemplating. From the very start, one thing I've noticed, and that is when he mentions rosy cheeks, it made me question that is this written from a female's perspective or not. So let's keep going. It was a quiet day that day. The sun was shining with intense luminosity as I stood still in the funeral home. You look just like your father, dear. Such a shame he had to leave us, said many, giving their regards to my deceased father. Truth is, I knew none of these people, and neither did they know me, and I did not care for their regards. All I cared for was my father. Why did he have to leave? I thought as tears ran down my rosy cheeks. Again, he is bringing up the term rosy cheeks quite too often, something I would really not promote or not do for candidates, because what happens when you're repeating terms is that it shows your lack of vocabulary. But don't worry, he does renew himself throughout the other paragraphs. So my father and I were inseparable ever since the day I was born. I spent every passing moments with him. He was the sweetest man who could make even the saddest moments happy. He taught me how to ride a bike. He taught me how to bake my first cake, read me bedtime stories every night, and even slept beside me until felt as I fell fast asleep in his arms. He was my hero. However, all that happiness lasted till when I went to high school. As I returned from school one day, I found out that he had left for another city due to a job transfer. No goodbyes, no hugs. All he left was a note stating, "Make me proud, Jane. I love you." So I would pause here. Notice how Zawad did go with a different take throughout this narrative. Doesn't bring his own name, in fact changes his own gender, and brings this narrative to a more realistic, more relatable, more importantly, more, we could say, practical to what we see in our daily lives. Anger and sadness filled with my mind as I rushed to my room, slamming the door behind me. How could he leave without telling me? I thought we were inseparable. Again, he's bringing his rhetorics throughout his write-up. The following months were rough as the house grew colder every passing day. The one I relied on for comfort and the shoulder I would cry on, he was no longer here. No longer here. Moreover, I started getting bullied and picked on at school. This drove me into depression to the point where even when my father, the one I loved most, would return, I would not even speak to him. I would not even look at him, trying to distance myself every time he tried to talk to me. So again, guys, something about this body para is that he does miss a few words which I had to predict or basically foreshadow he would have used, and that's a case which you guys should be aware of not missing out words. A few days after his funeral, I entered my father's study. I think, assuming again a study table, all our favorite books, all our memories laid there, still and shrouded in dust. At the corner of the study, an unusual book caught my eye, a leather-bound diary pressed under a pile of old newspapers. Upon opening it, I realized it was my father's. It had many entries, the first dating back to the day of my birth, stating, "The greatest day of my life." In each entry, he went on about the things he and I did, all the adventures we went on, how I was growing up to be a fine young woman. Tears filled my eyes as I flipped through the geriatric diary. Geriatric diary. As the entries went on, he started writing about how I stopped speaking to him. I had cut him off from my life. He spoke about my constant episodes and battle with depression, how I had grown slender and was withering away into sadness. He regretted leaving me, regretted not saying goodbye. He started talking about how he grew sad and tired of himself, stating he himself grew depressed and tired. In the final entry, he wrote, "Quit procrastinating, you should learn by now. You will either talk to Jane or die trying." Recalling back, I remember him calling me before his accident. He was trying to talk to me. Did he leave because he could not talk to me? Did I neglect my dad even at his last moments? Guilt gripped my throat as my heart grew louder. All the sadness, all the pain kept coming rushing back as I regretted not talking to him one last time. I started breaking down completely until I remember what he would always say to me. Never cry over spilled milk. Never regret anything. A few months have passed since my father's accident, and I have finally moved onwards, and I am in a better part of my life. As I look back, I wonder, was my father's crooked smile to the left or right? So that's a word count of 450. I think he's again approximating this, and yeah, your examiner will definitely be checking this throughout, and it's a good thing to direct your examiners to basically give a nice idea of what your word count suggests. And yes, the content and structure when it comes to the feedback, I must say that this was one heck of a write-up. This gives a very clear transition from one narrative to another. It has the objective mindset of how narrative should be. It does fabulous when it comes to giving a clear view of what the code suggests. And most importantly, guys, this is something all candidates needs to keep into account, and that is to keep your narrative very well paced. Most times when I'm reading through scripts as an examiner, most candidates tend to go very slow and rush at the very ending, and basically coming to a very abrupt conclusion. Not the best case scenarios when it comes to narratives. On the other hand, this is to the candidates who prefer writing descriptive writings, and that is, make sure you are focusing on one scene and filling it up with sensory organs, so sensory devices, so the five senses: the touch, the feel, the sight, smell, taste, and what you're hearing. That being said, it's very important that Zawad's beautiful, crafted, emotionally resonant narrative is a very structured and sophisticated and deliberate, has a nice opening, has backstories behind it. He has very well grammatical and vocabs when it comes to writing. And now let's get to the style and accuracy. And yeah, this is where 12 out of 15 is actually a very, very exceptional score. And yes, his vocabulary showed that. I made sure to highlight every unique sentences or words or phrases he has used, like inseparably. He used melancholy, he used bittersweet. He had phrases like tears ran down my rosy cheeks, and the house grew colder every passing day. So these are the metaphor, the literary devices which every essays should definitely include, or try to include, to have a higher band score. And then there's the sentences which starts with long lyrical sentences balanced with short punchy ones. So like, here's my hero, no goodbyes, no hugs. There's like small, very like 2 words, and that's one sentence. So these are some writing styles which would really elevate your score, and emphasize more character and meaning towards your write-ups. Again, but no essays are perfect. Some weaknesses he included through his writing is that there are some misspell, like spelling error is a thing. There will be misspelled content. He is missing out words, and again, punctuations and how he's keeping his writing flowing is something it's hard to keep consistency towards, and that's something you guys can work on. And yeah, as for the suggestions, by the way, I did talk about his maturity, something which I haven't yet mentioned, and I was like waiting for the last part, and that is, you will notice that his speech and his essay both had rhetorical questions. These questions really add meaning and add a characteristical touch of grabbing the reader's attention. So especially during the speech, when you're giving rhetorical questions, it makes the reader wonder as well. It also gives a nice tonality to how the reader wants to read it. And more importantly, you want to make your reader engage with questions, or if I'd say engage with realism that they can relate to. And that's something every examiner would want from you, like making them think twice and have a different take. That out of all these candidates, this is one candidate that definitely tries to deliver a bigger and more imaginable, a bigger write-up, basically, a bigger viewpoint. So yeah, on the mark scheme end, you will notice it's exactly that. And it talks about how your narrative has consistently effective response to the task, a wide range of descriptive or narrative features. Again, the descriptive feature talks about the 5 sensory devices and how you're bringing up sentences that makes the examiner picture and vision the scenaric view. And the narrative talks about the settings that transits from one place to another. It is to create a response that makes the reader come with a mindset that gives a lot of events throughout the narrative. So that's the difference between a descriptive and a narrative. And most importantly, when it comes to your vocabs, that's the 15 marks, you want to have your own style. Make sure you're not making any spelling errors. Your punctuations are very filled so that the flow of reading suggests the examiner to read it as exactly how as you intended the examiner to read. And most importantly, try to put in as many as vocabs, like unique words, to give more meaning towards your write-up. Like, make the examiner understand that you have a big vocabulary dictionary with you. That being said, guys, yeah, I'll try to keep this a bit short. Not gonna lie, this was my second take because the first one wasn't so well. Like, I forgot to turn on my mic. So yeah, that's a big bummer. I do apologize and excuse me for my stutters. But yeah, hoping all the best for you guys. Inshallah, coming back with paper 1 much more stronger. But yeah, wish you all the best. Good luck, guys. I'm pretty sure you can ace this, and inshallah it's gonna be much more higher than what you have already scored for Fastpapers. Because one thing is that once you have already experienced the simulation of a real exam, your next one should be better. And hopefully, if you follow the guidelines and the tips and tricks I mentioned here, maybe, or it should be a way better script than what came out this mock. So yeah, good luck, guys. Wishing all the best. Yeah, bye bye.